Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Welcome to episode 112 of Sports Management Podcast. This episode is part of Sports Integrity Week, hosted by SIGA, Sports Integrity Global Alliance. Sports Integrity Week is entering a new era, Stage 3.0. Sports Integrity Week is the world's leading event dedicated to sports integrity, and it knows no boundaries. I am proud to be a media partner to SIGA with this podcast, and if you want to learn more about SIGA and their great work for sports integrity, follow the link in the description below. Now, today's guest is Sandra Lopez. She's a tech executive with experiences from large companies like Adobe, Intel, and Microsoft. She's also a board of director advisor to startups, co-chair to SIGA North America, and she also sits on SIGA's tech committee. Get ready to learn how she got into sports tech, why she walked out of a job due to the glass ceiling, her definition of empowerment, the difference between a sponsor and a mentor, her work with SIGA, the importance of SIGA's work for the sports industry, and much more. Sandra Lopez, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you. Good morning. It's 6 a.m. over here, but it's nice to be here and joining you virtually.
I'm very happy that you're here. Thank you so much for getting up early. It's early afternoon here on a Friday. So to introduce you, you're a tech executive, you're a board of director advisor to startups. You're also the co-chair of SIGA, Sports Integrity Global Alliance in North America, and you're on their tech committee. So a lot of things and very interesting things that we'll talk about today.
Yes, I look forward to talking about it and connecting the dots that allowed me to get to where I am today.
Really excited as well. So for those who don't know when this will be released, it will be in the middle of the SIGA Integrity Week. So it will be a lot discussion on that and integrity in sports. But as you said, to connect the dots, let's start with how did you start out your career?
Yeah, I always like to say to individuals, I was born and raised in Silicon Valley, literally born in the heart of Silicon Valley, San Mateo, California. And I started my career in the tech industry. And I did that while I was much more interested in the fashion industry. And what I learned very quickly when I started my career after I graduated from college was I was much more curious about how things, objects affect society and consumers. And I chose to pivot from fashion directly into the tech industry, being able to predict that the technology industry was going to change how we live forever. And I often like to say there are a couple of vectors that influence society: fashion, sports, music, media, Hollywood entertainment. And arguably now technology is shaping how we influence society. So I've had the great fortune to work for both small startups and very large corporations and start new businesses within large corporations all around the world. So while I was born and bred in Silicon Valley, also lived in New York, lived in Europe, in Italy, and in Beijing. And what got me really interested in sports and kind of pivoting there was Intel provided an opportunity to kick off a sports media division, which was really about democratizing access to the viewership of sports and driving fandom from all parts of the world. And at the same time, understanding that every individual is different and being able to break down a play and or a catch from any perspective. And so I got myself back into sports. I grew up playing sports. My father was a former professional athlete. And so it is one of my passions. And so I am it's such an honor to be part of the Sports Integrity Global Alliance. I think ethics needs to be at the heart of sports. There is massive opportunity to be done. And the Women's FIFA World Cup was just a prime example of what transpired at the end, in which the Spanish team won.
Yeah. So you mentioned Intel there, and you have worked also for Adobe and Microsoft, and you said a big corporation. So how do you see the connection between tech and sports?
Yeah, I think you got to break it down into the experience of the sports from many different facets, right? So let's start from the world of fandom. When I said technology changes culture and society, whatever's happening outside of sports, the expectations will happen inside of sports. So a very prime example, several decades ago, I would say over 10 years ago, the notion of network connectivity. You go into the stadium and the expectation is that you have complete access without any degradation of bandwidth to use your cell phone. And so that is a prime example in terms of the expectation of a fan is to always be connected. And so you think about the infrastructures of these stadiums and why are they multi-billion dollars now is that you have to think about not only the technology that's happening today, but also branch predict like what are consumers going to experience tomorrow. I talked about this over maybe 4 years ago before autonomous cars and before people were starting to talk about autonomous cars. And so, I mean, the benefit of being in Silicon Valley is you get to see where the future is. I said, autonomous cars isn't just about not having a driver driving the car, but imagine the world of tailgating. You're literally from the point in which you leave your destination, let's say it's your home, your car is now going to be an extension of a living room, right? Who's to say, because you're not driving anymore, that you can't have a TV in the car, you can't have your soda pop or whatever you like to drink and your chips. And the tailgating begins when you leave your house and then you enter into the stadium. Well, what does that look like now? And then on the other part is the athlete. I always like to say is that technology opened the world and provided information to everything around us, whether it's right in front of us and getting information about the location or the monument that we're seeing at our fingertips, or about things overseas. But now with technology, we're able to understand what's happening to the human body. And so whether you look at the various wearables and having all that data helps improve our overall performance. And then you take computer sensors and technologies in which you can capture the movement of an athlete and over 26 different limbs, and you can start to predict when there's going to be an injury. You can start to take this data and understand how do you minimize concussions. And so technology touches all facets of sports. And I always like to say, and I always challenge the tech as the sports industry is, when you're looking for a technology partner, any of the big partners, whether it's like, Microsoft, Intel, SAP, Salesforce, the list can go on, don't look at the tech partners as a sponsor. Look at them in terms of what is your vision and what experiences do you want to create for the brands that you are sponsoring, the fans, the athletes. Think about the strategy first and work backwards and determine the best partner to fulfill those experiences. Oftentimes, I do see entities in the sports industry that they're so focused on hitting their revenue targets and their brand sponsorship targets that tech company X is willing to pay it, but it doesn't align to the right vision of the technology, right? So I would say at the heart of the sports experiences is not only the fans, it's not only the athletes, not only the management organizations, but it's also technology.
Yeah. No, super interesting. And what you said, it's so you have the fandom side, but you also have the technology, the wearables. You mentioned the women's football before. That's a lot of things that I think you can do a lot because there's so little scientific research on women's health in sports, and you have all of these knee injuries. So, I mean, could there be some technological advance there that could help the women's game grow and not having, know why or prevent these injuries?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, our physiological bodies are uniquely different from that of men. We have to understand that. And I think it's very fascinating that you're starting to see the rise of apparel and sporting goods that are uniquely designed for females. So I spoke to an individual at the Under Armour, and they created a soccer cleat specifically designed for females. And I think oftentimes, I don't know, Marcus, if you kind of looked at several years ago, everybody used to say there's no money in women's sports. And I would say, yes, there has always been money. And they're like, oh, now it's the rise of women's sports. Well, it's because we're opening the door. like the doors had started to be opened a little bit, and now people are starting to see we're filling stadiums. So that was never an issue. There was never an opportunity. We're now on broadcast channels of mainstream. Well, it was always there. Now the opportunity has opened up. In Kansas, they're opening the first women's stadium for their soccer team. And everybody's, there's a rise of women's sports. And yes, however, I will challenge the industry to think about like all the missed opportunity because the door was closed for so many years. And so now it's exciting to see the door open. It's exciting to see Generation Alpha and Generation Z in terms of both females, men's, and theys, that female athletes are equal to the male athletes in terms of GOAT status. And so I think it's an exciting time to be in the world of sports. At the same time, ethics, and this is why I'm so proud of being part of the Sports Integrity Global Alliance, should be at the center stage and talking about how, albeit there's been advancements in sports, I do not think there's been advancements enough in the area of ethics.
So let's jump into SIGA. So SIGA stands for, as you said, Sports Integrity Global Alliance. You are a co-chair, and I'm a media partner with this podcast. So we both, are involved in their mission. So how were you first introduced to SIGA, and why did you decide to take a role with them?
Yeah, so when I was first, I go back to when I started to re-engage in the sports industry from a business perspective at Intel. And being in the technology industry, it is a male-dominated world. And when I decided to go into a business career, bringing both sports and tech together, I remember attending this conference. It was in LA. And I walked in, and what I saw was a sea of men, all around similar ages, plus or minus 5 years, but a medium age of in the 40s, all in blue suits and all homogeneous. And while I thought I was a minority in the tech industry, I felt like, wow, I thought the tech industry struggled by diversification. I go the sports industry, because the conference was not just about male sports as well, sports as a whole. I said to myself, wow, this industry needs to change and have many more females represented at conferences like this. So that began my entry. And then I had the opportunity to meet Emmanuel at a conference. And I like to surround myself with purpose-driven individuals that are kind and want to leave a dent in the world. And his conviction and his passion to challenge the sports industry to be better is something that you just can't say no to. And similar to the tech industry, I believe in ethical tech for good. The same values and principles apply to sports. And so when you have the opportunity to be part of making change, you just can't say no to this opportunity. So it's such an honor to be a co-chair bringing Sports Integrity Global Alliance to the United States, driving the hard, difficult conversations. It is such an honor, and it's also equally not easy because you are challenging corporations that are publicly traded to do better and help drive change. But I'm a big believer that it is in the collective we, and it starts with one, Emmanuel, and as a leadership, kind of articulating and challenging other institutions, both public and private, to do better. So I'm here on their journey, here to help them drive change and leave a meaningful impact for the next generation.
That's amazing. So why is sports integrity so important?
I mean, I just can never understand why, if you can create the same demand, why are females just not getting paid equal to that of the male? I mean, you saw that it was the change in the U.S. women's soccer team. It took a long time. Anyway, they started to challenge the industry, and just recently they actually got to equal pay. But they didn't have to do that, right? We saw what happened when the women's team the Spain won the World Cup, and how misogyny exists. And we've seen the stories about gymnasts. And so, at least for me, in particular, in the sports female side, we need to completely dismantle what has been created and start anew. And so this is why integrity and ethics needs to be at the heart of sports conversations. There is also the notion of betting and how we know betting's coming to the United States, and massive opportunity, absolutely. And at the same time, you can't rig so that people make more money. You have to think about also the addiction. So you can't just follow the dollars and go into capitalism. You also need to think about the impact it brings to individuals. And that's no different from the tech industry. Social media has increased the propensity of young individuals wanting to commit suicide. Sports betting will increase the propensity of people becoming addicted, right? And the addiction, individuals will often say, well, that is that individual's problem. I go, no, but we created technologies, or we're enabling an addiction. And it could tear down a home. Somebody can lose their house. It could affect a child not having food on the table. So I always believe, understand where every dollar is coming from and understand how it's affecting society for the better and also for the worse. And so this is why I think sports integrity is essential, not optional, within the sports ecosystem.
For sure. And it's an interesting point that you bring up with the sports betting, because that really ties in also what you work with in tech and but also the integrity part of it and the addiction and all of that. So that's a really, especially in the US, since it was legalized kind of recent. In
Right.
Europe, we've had it for quite some time, at least in Sweden.
Yep.
So it's, but in US particularly, and it also shines a light on that you mentioned betting, because SIGA is doing, like, they have different pillars. They have youth development, they're working on betting. They are having different aspects of their work that they do to ensure integrity in many different sectors of the sports industry.
Yeah. And I think you have to think, even with betting, like we were talking about technology, well, the betting industry, the underlying, what's enabling it all is technology. And you have to think about, what about when technology fails? What are you going to do to all those people that placed massive amount of bets, right? How do you manage through that? How do you manage the notion of all data privacy? And so there's the technology impact on society, and then there's things where technology won't always go right, and it affects the person that placed the bet. Thinking about that, thinking about how it might change the game. And so there's so many elements. It's any new experience or any new thing, it has multidimensionality into it. And it's very easy to think about how we get that extra dollar. And what I challenge anybody in any type of like business is think about the multiple different areas in which it will get impacted, or different scenarios that will transpire. And what is your position? Like, when do you want to talk about it? When do you not want to do it? When do you have a plan B? When is it your accountability and your responsibility? When is it not your accountability and responsibility? So there's so many elements. And then like SIGA, we talk about sustainability. You think about all the waste that happens when you go into a stadium, and can you change and think about, what does the world's lead, which is LEED is an organization focused on creating the most environmental sound building and experiences, what would that look like? And how does that change the fan experience? So thinking about a zero waste stadium, I mean, that to me totally gets me excited. And it's a commitment to saving the world for the next generation of fans and next generation of athletes and people in the sports management organization.
At big events like Olympics or World Cup, there's always Japanese fans cleaning up after themselves. And it makes me so happy, and it gets always attention, but it's always them. There's no one else that really takes that. But I don't know if it's a cultural thing but it's so not like they really, and not only their own waste, they go out and they clean up, and the small things can really be large in the big spectrum of things.
I 100% agree. I mean, I think to your point, you should interview somebody in the Japanese that's in the sports industry, but I saw that too. I saw the image within the Women's World Cup and they were cleaning up after themselves. And I thought, well, what if there was a way that you no longer have to clean up after yourself, right? What does that look like? What does the beverage disposals potentially look like? And so I do think if you think about the sports industry, so many things that it touches, the creation of a building, the types of food you consume, and we think about like eating better. Can you provide alternates to, your French fries or the primary typical, sports food, maybe a healthier version? That we were having this conversation at a conference around, women in sports. And it's interesting because the same playbook is getting applied in which they're serving beer. But, if it's going to be a stadium with a pretty significant presence of females, maybe we don't want beer. Maybe we want rosé all day, right? So just thinking about all these different elements, and we are spending multi-billion dollars in these new stadiums, I really believe it could be done better. It could be really pushed the limits in terms of think about the greenest stadium that ever existed. What does that look like? And that requires to bring food suppliers, that requires to bring, chefs, that requires to bring people, the technology industry. And oh my God, I'd be so honored to work on a project like that to really push the where's the future going when you think about sustainability, quality, technology for good?
Yeah. Do you know Victoria Cogevino?
No, I don't.
Okay,
no.
I think she's part Greek, part Argentinian, and she was mentioning what you said. She's a tech entrepreneur in sports as well. And she was mentioning, but you said rosé, but she was saying that, for example, if you offer different type of like oat milk latte at the football games or stuff like that, just to make these fans feel included, that you offer something for them.
Exactly. And those conversations are happening, and you're still going to make your margins. In fact, maybe you're going to spend more, they're going to generate more revenue. There was a conversation that was being had. This was maybe a year ago. And this individual, we were talking about merchandising. And they were saying, well, females don't buy sports paraphernalia. And I'm like, what? And I go, have you ever gone into where the jerseys are? You see as much females buying men jerseys as you do the men. So, and there was an event in which they had female jerseys for a women's soccer team. The line was like going in circles and circles. I mean, everybody wanted to buy the clothing and the merchandise. And so the challenge is, I think there's all these biases and these truths that exist in people's heads that are not truths. We're still having to prove models that if you create the environment, it will come, but the demand is already there. The environment hasn't been created.
I know that diversity and inclusion is a topic that you hold dear as well, and we have talked about it now. But one thing that I read when I did research for this podcast was that you walked out of a job when you were 25 years old because your boss said that there's a glass ceiling in the company.
Yes. Wow. How did you find that? Nobody has been able to find that. So you were a great journalist. Wow. That was pretty impressive.
Thank you. So how was that experience? How did that make you feel? And how did you move on from that?
I never thought being a woman was going to be an issue for me because when I was growing up, I was taught that if you want to be it, you can be it. And it was my first job out of college. And I thought I was as capable as everybody else. And I was on this program with this fast track. And I remember this vividly. It was a lunch that I got invited to with the executives. So think about chief operating officer, CFO, CMO, along with other peers of mine that were kind of on the fast track. We were identified. These people have special talent. Let's put them in a fast track. Let's give them exposure to C-level leadership. And it was a lunch. And when the chief operating officer leaned into me and said, hey, this gentleman, Aaron, who was across from me, who was a really great colleague of mine, would be more successful than me. And I honestly thought, well, wow, Aaron's very talented because he's into statistics and he's into analytics. And our job at that time involved a lot of like data analysis. And then I said, well, maybe I need to go get my MBA degree. This is what I was thinking in my head. And I go, well, why do you think he's going to be more successful than me? I'm just curious. And he's like, well, there's a glass ceiling that exists. And I remember driving home and I just said, why will I want to spend another second in a company that's going to tell me already that I can never be an executive at that company? So the next day, not sure if it was naive. This is where mentors and sponsorships really never existed because it was in the late 90s. I just decided to quit with no plan B. And at that time, I never realized that I was like a feminist in terms of, equality, in terms of mental, like females can do it as much as men and days as well. And so that's what transpired. And so I left. In hindsight, if I were to do it all over again, if I were to have a mentor, I think I would have given them different feedback. I would try to change the system, give them a shot to see if they could be more open. And then if not, maybe eventually quit. But that was my experience. And I am very vocal. And I tell people I'm vocal for equality simply because society is diverse. And society is diverse and you're codependent on these consumers to drive your business. Why is it that we still see 95% white males? That just can't be. And when I talk about diversity, it's not only about ethnicity, it's like people with disabilities that you need to be having represented. It's people that are transgender. Transgender's at the heart of the sports conversation right now. I've seen kind of positions that are being taken. I just saw yesterday the Swimming Federation. If you are transgender, you no longer can compete within, like, if you're male to female, you never can compete. You can no longer compete in the female and vice versa. So I think you need these different perspectives so that at the end of the day, you create policies that represent what's in the best interest of both the athletes and the game at large.
Yeah. No, that is a big question right now in sports. And I know that speaking of swimming, I think her name is Riley Baker,
Right.
might be a swimmer, that she's very vocal about it. So that's a big topic for sure.
It's a hard one. And I've been thinking about this for over a year, and I've been soliciting input and different perspectives from large apparel, from athletes and doctors. And it's not an easy one because if your values are everybody's equal, but then you also need to think about physiologically, our bodies are different. And if somebody's working so hard to get that gold medal and physically they're just genetically not able to compete, was that really fair? So I don't have a point of view yet. I'm still learning, and hopefully we do right for the athlete and the game at large.
Yeah. You mentioned mentors and sponsors before, and you have also said that men play a critical role in the next generation of female leaders. So how would you advise a young woman with aspirations to be a leader or an executive? How should they choose their mentor? Should it be a man? Should it be a woman? And if they choose a man, do they need to think differently in some ways? Or how would you advise them?
First, I think it's really important to understand the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor will advise you. A sponsor will advocate for you. And you need both. Mentors are advisors to many different things. How do you ask for that promotion? How do you job pivot? How do you get into industry? How do you, as a parent, come back to work? This is both father figures and mother figures. It's not, female only. And so I say is that go look for the person that you think is doing that extremely well. And just ask, hey, I really admire how you navigate the overall ecosystem. Let's say you're going into sales or business development. I really would love to learn from you. I would say 3 out of 10 times you're going to get a no, but most people are willing and able to help. And ask your manager, hey, I really want to learn from X. Is there a mentor that you recommend? Go on LinkedIn, send them a cold email. You'll be surprised that oftentimes you're going to get a yes. And the conversation around mentor and sponsorship is something that's pretty pervasive. And so people are thinking about it. The reason why I say you need to go find your male allies is that, make no mistake, the world still works in a male-dominated world. And when an opportunity comes up, this is where it goes to sponsorship. When an opportunity comes up, most likely a male is going to know because they're in the senior level positions. You want him to advocate for you. I will say, in terms of how I got to where I got to, it was all men except for 2 females. And so we need men in our corners, and there are a lot of male allies out there. And you just need to be able to ask for the help and work through others to help you connect dots with a mentor and a sponsor. The one thing about sponsors I think it's really important is the sponsor has to be close to either working within the business that you're in, like the actual company, and or adjacent, because that's how they make more meaningful difference, because they're supposed to advocate for you, advocate for that promotion, advocate for additional budget, advocate for that amazing strategic initiative that's going to put the company in a different trajectory. So just think about, mentors could be anywhere. Sponsors should be very closely tied to the business that you're in and the function that you actually are in.
I see. And you mentioned also how to get back after your parental leave, something like that. That was also a big decision that you took in your career. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you're spending most of your life and you're hustling and you have aspirations to be an executive to, one, get pregnant, because there are perceptions like, can she give us our 100%? And the answer is no. And by the way, men can't always give 100% either. So no, you had good days and bad days. And then people would make decisions on your behalf. Well, she can't travel anymore because she's at 6-month stage. Well, that's not true. I can still travel. I have no doctor's notice that I'm not allowed to travel. And so people start to make decisions that affect your career trajectory. Then you leave, and then the pressure of, do I leave 1 month, 3 months? If you're in a high intense job, you feel the pressure that you have to come back because you don't want to lose out on those big decisions. And so I took a 3-month time off, came back, and I struggled. And I had a mentor to help me, like, how do you do this all? I'm not a good parent. I'm not a good, leader. I'm trying to figure out this parenthood thing. And to be honest, there's no playbook. You're not going to get it all right. And what I learned is that ask for help and support, both at work and at home. And know that sometimes your 80% is okay. This notion of work-life balance, just get rid of that notion. I tell people it's like a dial that you're moving. When I go to work, it's all 100%. Like, I'm focused. I'm in the job. Then I would move the dial back when I'm at home. It's about my daughter. When I go on a business trip, I literally, as soon as I get on that plane, I dial my home life off, and it's all about work. And I wasn't connecting with my daughter, right? I was like, this is my work. And I come home and I'm back to being a mom and a wife, and also allowing time for myself. And so what I would tell people is priorities are always shifting. There's no priority 1, 2, and 3. At one moment in my life, like this morning, my priority is talking about Sports Integrity Global Alliance. That is my job 1. This afternoon, it's going to go see my friend who just came out of ICU. That is my job 1. 1 is about being an amazing friend at that moment in time. And so I think society puts this whole work-life balance and trying to fit everything into a 100%. And I would just say your 100% is always shifting based on the time of day that you're in and based on what the energy is required of you. And in this conversation of prioritization, don't ever forget the priority that you need for yourself. Not work, not parent, not being a wife, not being a friend. It's time for yourself is equally important so that you can show up for everything else.
Exactly. And that's the airplane analogy, right? They say when the mask comes down, you put your own first and then you put them, because if you don't help yourself, how are you going to help someone else? And the same with your, physical health. If you're not feeling well, you will not be able to take care of your family as well, or,
100%. And I think oftentimes maybe we're bred by society to like focus on everybody else and then us. And I have changed the paradigm as I do focus on myself and I create very clear boundaries. So that's your point, Marcus. I can be there for everybody else. That's very important.
That brings me into leadership. So, of course, you're an executive. You have been a leader in different companies and different roles. So how would you describe your leadership style?
I think first and foremost, just because I'm an executive at a corporation does not mean that I'm a leader. I can manage things. And I always believe leader is a title that you must earn by those that become, hopefully you can create followers. But more than followers, you want people that are engaged with the mission and vision that you're driving. I have learned, and maybe this is just a byproduct of how I was raised, is to be a good human and realize that we are all different. So the power of EQ, as much as IQ, is just as important. So my leadership style is about I'm in service to the business and I'm in service to those that are on my team. I am not hierarchical. I am one of the team members, oftentimes the coach. And we're all about, winning championships. And then how do you do that? And I spend a lot of time learning from some of the best, what I would argue, some of the best leaders and what inspires me about them. Whether it's Steve Kerr, the Warriors coach, whether it's some various presidents, whether our leaders, the Patagonia CEO. I try to observe and take nuggets of wisdom from all of them and try to inject them into how I try to inspire my team to win championships and be open to constructive feedback. I'm not always going to get it right. I'm a human. I would say leaders are being asked to change and really think about things that are happening outside the business world. So in the United States, whether the conversation around pro-life, pro-choice, those get filtered into the business world and in your organization because your team members want to hear your point of view. And when this was happening, I had to really think about how do I want to show up as a leader? And for me was, if I'm a big person about diversity of perspective, I have to recognize that in my team, there's diverse points of view, pro-life, pro-choice. And so my position was this. In our team, we respect each other, which means we all have different points of view. Know that everybody's struggling. And we need to respect that and help each other out as we navigate through these times that, challenge our values and recognize that we're all going to have different points of view. And did not take a position. And that was a hard one because some people wanted me to take a very, very hard position. And I wasn't going to do that. And so I would say great leaders seek to understand what's happening at this very moment and ask themselves, how do I want to show up today in a way that inspires the team, your business partners, your customers, and you don't generate followers, you engage people. What happens is you bring people that want to engage with you and want to be part of your mission and vision. It's very hard to do, but it can be done.
You said also somewhere that with empowerment, that is not given to you, that you can give that also to others. And that speaks a little bit to what you said as well.
Yeah. I mean, the word empowerment, it's really interesting. We always say we empower other people. But the word empower means to give somebody power. And the reality is you always have had the power inside. And I would say it's a power to understand who you would like to be as a human and to create your own path and your own journey. And that is very scary. But I've been on this journey, like it just happened over the last 7 years, is that to find my own journey, my own path, it's very not traditional, and that's okay. And you get people that are going to judge you, people that are going to agree with you and disagree with you. But as long as you feel like you're doing what's right for you and living up to your best life and you're being kind in the process, it's A-okay.
I love that. Approaching the end here, is there something that we haven't mentioned yet or touched upon that you feel is important to bring up?
Yes. The biggest thing I think in sports is the economic disparity that exists. We talked about Sports Integrity Global Alliance, very focused on youth. We have to remember that the cost to play the game for those individuals that eventually want to go into more competitive sports. If somebody doesn't have the economic means to travel in the particular, even within your own little city, because the parents are working and trying to put food on the table and they can't afford it. Or in some cases, you said that you play hockey, like think about the cost of all of that. And then, so that's just the beginning of like the athletes playing. And then to go watch a game now, I live in San Francisco. Yes, it's one of the like expensive cities in the world. And also it doesn't have to be so expensive. The parking, the food, the seats. So now if I want to take my daughter to go watch a game, it's almost $400. That means that a lot of people can't go experience that. And yes, it's great technology because you have VR and AR that will kind of bring you closer to the game. Yet I do think there's this whole notion of the economic disparity, and we are creating a larger divide as cost of goods are increasing or cost of experiences are increasing. So as sports brings entertainment and everything just gets more amplified. And I think sports should be experienced by all. And how do we think about those that are economically challenged and ensure that they're have an equal shot at becoming a gold medal winner and or the World Cup. And so that is top of mind as I think about the disparity that's only growing, not shrinking.
Yeah, and that's a very, very important one. And as you mentioned, ice hockey is an expensive sport, and that's something that the companies within are trying to help out. How can you, for people to try a sport, can you give them equipment that they can then give back? They don't need to buy one if they don't know, and different type of support. But of course, it's difficult. And I mean, that's why I guess that soccer is the biggest sport or maybe basketball, because it has the least economic barriers to enter, I would say. But really, really important topic. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. And even even soccer, the cleats, the jerseys, there are some families that cannot afford that. The kids go through it very quickly. And so the choice of a little kid saying, I really want to play soccer, but I know my parents are trying to put food on the table, they're going to give up soccer. They're not going to even put that option on the table to their parents. I have heard stories like this, and that breaks my heart, because that kid could become next, Messi, or that kid can become the next Serena Williams, and tennis is just as expensive. So I just want to make sure that we figure out how we solve that, because that's a broken system.
Definitely. And not only that, but also for like the health aspect of it, of sports, that how, a kid that plays soccer or basketball or tennis a few times a week, what that makes for their health. So
Absolutely.
it's a big question.
It's a big question. And, and some of the kids can't stay after school to go play sports because their parents have to pick them up at that very specific time. So it's a complex topic, but I do think half of the journey is just to start talking about it, and then starting to put solutions in place and testing ideas and thoughts. And I always tell people it just takes one to drive change.
That's true.
And SIGA's helping. So I'm so honored to be part of it. I'm glad that you're part of it as well.
Me too. And I will put some more information and links to SIGA in the show notes. So if anyone wants to learn more, just scroll down and click the link.
Great.
So the last question that I ask everyone is, who in your network do you think would be a good guest for this podcast?
I always like to kind of impart, sometimes diversity of thought puts somebody from a different industry that's not involved in sports, because they will share a nugget of how they view the sports industry slightly different. So I won't name a person, but I do think like an anthropologist and a culturist, a visionary that does trend and vision and culture to understand, like, where is the world going Like, how are they seeing the world as a whole? And their viewpoint of like, where does sports fit in, right? We live in a multi-generational world, boomers, Xers, millennials, Zs and alphas, and everything that's happening in our society with our world. I would love to hear from a futurist and anthropologist and see their viewpoint of the world and how does sports fall into that. I mean, that's kind of what I would be really excited. So not a person, so sorry, but
No problem.
it is a different type of person I think would be very interesting to have you cover in the podcast.
Definitely.
I'll see if I can help you connect the dots with. I have a couple people in mind that you can kind of talk to. But a really well-known, famous CEO used to tell me the best way to bring forward thoughtful, unexpected ideas is to surround yourself with individuals that are not in your industry. Because there'll be a seed of wisdom that will kind of come up in like maybe in your strategy sessions that you haven't thought about. And so it helps you take a look at the world differently. Like Steve Jobs studied calligraphy. So that helped him understand the power of like user design and design principles, right? So kind of that principle I'm imparting brings somebody that is completely different from the industry.
Yeah, I like that. Sandra Lopez, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.